Greetings, buffers, friends of buffers. And by that I mean Berrien UU Fellowship friends. In the future, I think maybe we'll add free thinkers on there too. Add some more to our acronym. It would still be buffers, I think. It's good to be back. We've been away Zooming last week, a couple of weeks now. Wow. Yeah, some of us are used to that. Some of us do not want to do that at all. I understand. Welcome to today's three-part service. I'll be your service leader, Harvey Johnson. See, I can prove it right here. And it's got a blank here. I can be whatever title I want. Part one, following the announcements, BUUF Treasurer Jim Fuller will give us a brief financial update. Since our fellowship is entirely lay-led and lay-funded, it's good for all of us to know how much money, how much income is coming in, how much is going out to fund our staff, building and grounds, and social justice priorities, and how much is in the bank to fund upcoming expenses or emergencies. You're going to tell them exactly how much is in the endowment, Jim? Yeah. Okay. Spoiler alert, as many of you know, we accomplished an incredible amount on a very small budget. I suppose it's all relative. Everything's relative, right, to what you're used to, especially compared to other such organizations of our size. Part two of the three-part, following the story for all ages about Anne Frank, Julie Williams and Gloria Weberg will help us honor International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Gloria will then lead us in our quarterly Fabric of Life ceremony, during which buffers are invited and friends are invited to come forward and briefly honor a deceased individual of importance to them. And then part three of today's theme is, who is your personal hero? There's one of mine just came through. Good morning, Deej.
Good morning, everyone. So for anybody who doesn't already know my name, I'm Jim Fuller, and I'm the treasurer this year and next year. Hopefully everybody received, or virtually everybody received an envelope this week with your donor statement. That is calendar year giving, so it doesn't align with our church year, which is a fiscal year that starts July 1. So the document you have is good for your taxes if you are able to use that for taxes, which is not as easy as that used to be. But what was more important is what was the letter that you got from membership. And it highlighted all the things we do around here. The potlucks, the Sunday services, the circle talk, soul matters discussion group, ethical eating. So before I get into the minutia of our finances, I just want to say that this place is really about the people. We have a lot of people who've been here a long time. I'm going to call out Gretchen because I saw in the membership book, because she's coming up on 40 years that she's been coming. And Gloria's next. You're coming up on 40 years in about 6 months. Anyway, so it's the people that make this place work. It's what you give, what we say in our every Sunday. The community of ourselves. Its resources are our resources. Wealth is what we share. As we give to this community, we affirm our lives within it. I guess I've said that enough times, I got it memorized. Anyway, so our assets, our balance sheet, what we have looking down from 40,000 feet is we have a building, we have a property, we have an endowment fund, which has restrictions, those that came from a very generous donation. And we have a checking account, and we have quite a bit of cash on hand right now. We have about $40,000, and we have zero debt. So those are all positive things. We also always have trouble raising enough pledges to do all those things that are listed. And we're all running a deficit budget this year because we have a little savings. So our budget for the year was for, I don't have that memorized. So we budgeted $56,000 in spending. $64,000 in spending and $54,000 in income. So we're going to be spending some of our savings this year. And we're halfway through the church year. We're a little ahead of our projection on income, and we're almost exactly right on the money for expenses. We figured $64,000 in expenses, and we've spent $32,000 so far this year. So the budget seems to be doing well. So there are no particular funds that are seeing any extraordinary expense. Things we pay for are, of course, the utilities, insurance on the building, insurance on our employees, and we managed to do all those many programs like the soup kitchen, World Food Program, all on that very tiny budget. 75% of our expenses are going to pay people who, because despite the fact that nobody on the board gets paid, the people who clean the toilets do not get paid, but they're vital. But 75% of that budget goes to pay people like our office administrator, our piano player, our tech people, our minister. So anyway, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, this is our chart of accounts. And I will happily answer any specific questions, but I could put you all to sleep if I read all that. So I'm just going to say we're in a good place. We're not in a perfect place. We have a lot of assets. The endowment fund is healthy, and the social justice team led by Clark and Nancy distributes money once a year. Maybe I should have mentioned that more. That's a very big, important expense. It's about $4,000 a year that we give to support things like the Out Center and other community members that we believe are doing good work in this community. So that's about it. I'll happily answer any specific questions after the service. Thanks.
We light this chalice with both sorrow and joy in our hearts. We hold much sorrow over the needless loss of life throughout history, and especially during persecutions like the Holocaust. At the same time, we hold joy and appreciation for those who have fought and continue to fight against genocide and injustice, as well as for those who have served as a guiding light in our personal journeys, our own personal heroes and heroines. May we always keep in mind Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous words, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Blessed be, may it be so." I could have the children here for the story for all ages. I see two over here, and I see one who's my daughter, who's 11 and really doesn't think she's a kid anymore, but she's going to come here too. Come on over. You could sit in one of these chairs, or you could sit on the floor. Because I have to ask you questions as part of the story, because I don't want to be telling you stuff you already know. So I'm going to ask you, who knows who Anne Frank is? Okay, well, you do know or you don't? Okay, it's actually a girl, Anne. And if you don't know, then I know I need to tell a little bit more of the story. How about, let's see, do you know what a Jewish person is? Okay.
A person that like has a Jewish religion.
Yeah, thank you. And you don't want to add to that? Okay, good. Yes, Judaism is a religion. And Jewish people sometimes follow the religion, but they also are kind of Jewish ancestry. So if you were to say your ancestry, what would you say, Oliver? If someone said, where's your family from originally, what would you say? Ishmael, do you want to say? What would you say? Where would you say your family from? Not sure? How about you?
I don't know where you're from, but I know Dad was born in Ohio.
Okay, good answer. We're going to go back even a little further and talk about where families are originally from, way, way back. And so on a map, Jewish people originated from a country called Israel. By any chance, so in this map, there's this big body of water, and that's called the Mediterranean Sea. And around the Mediterranean Sea, in one part is a country called Israel. Can you find it? First, they took out the globe, but the globe is really big and the countries are really small. And Israel is a small country, so it might be hard to find. If you can't find it, I'll point it out. Okay, so here's the Mediterranean Sea, and over here is Israel, this little strip of land. And that nation was formed a long thousands of years ago, but unfortunately, a lot of the people there had to flee because of years of persecution. And so when they fled, where do you think they went on this map? They fled all over. What are some places you think they went? Yep, some went to Africa, some to Turkey, and some to Europe, right? And see, all these places. So even to Russia, a lot of Jewish people went to Russia. So many went to Germany, to this country right here. And that's where this story gets started. And it starts in, I think it's 1929. Now, Mr. Terry over there has the picture book, too long to read. I'm going to read from this book, but there's some really good photos in there that he's going to hold up when we get to them. And up there, you'll see a picture of Anne Frank. When I was in school, we read Anne Frank's diary. Do any of you ever keep a diary? Lois, do you have a diary? Yes, you do. Tell us what kinds of things you put in your diary.
I don't know. I had a diary a long time ago.
Okay, what kind of things did you write? Did that happen to you ever did?
Yeah, and all the struggles I went through.
Okay, yeah, so that's what a lot of us use a diary for, because sometimes, especially when we're teenagers, we don't want to tell mom and dad everything, right? Sometimes there's things we don't even want to tell our friends, but we want to tell somebody, so it's nice to write it down in a diary. So when I was young, probably about Lois's age in school, I read Anne Frank's diary. You may be reading that too, but usually a diary is private and we don't want to read it, do we? If you find someone's diary, do you want to read it? Okay, well, some of us do. But we probably wouldn't, because say, Lois, how would you feel if mom opened up your diary and read it?
I'd be fine.
You'd be okay? Okay, let me read it after.
I don't know where it is.
Okay, well, usually mom and dads try not to read the diary because it's private. I had a diary when I was young, so reading Anne Frank's diary was pretty cool to me because I got to read about another girl about my age. But Anne's story is not that simple. So I'm going to tell you the story, and at certain points, Mr. Terry might show you some pictures related to it. So we'll start out with a famous quote from Anne. She said, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." That's one of the things she wrote in her diary. But her diary mostly wasn't about all the good things that people could do. Most of it was about everyday things. Dear diary, this happened to me today. I like this boy, or I had this fight with my parents, that kind of thing. So Anne Frank was born in Germany. I'll leave the map out here so you can kind of get a feel for it. She was born in Germany to a Jewish family in 1929. That was almost 100 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah. 1929 she was born, so almost 100 years ago. 4 years later, a very, very, very bad man named Adolf Hitler, his Nazi party was voted into power, and he became the Chancellor of Germany. This change in power brought racism and violence against Jewish people. Now, Jewish people are just like other people. They're not any different if you saw a Jewish person on the street, just like if you saw a Catholic person on the street or a Mormon person on the street. Would you necessarily know their religion by looking at them? No, probably not. So her family had been in Germany for many generations, and she was just like other people, just like kids, right? So, Oliver, do you have friends at school that aren't UUs? Yeah. And how does that work? Do you have any problems relating to them? Yep or no? No. No. So we can, you, you do. How do you have, what are your problems relating to non-UU?
We have fights.
About what?
About stuff that's not.
Okay. Yeah, so just like you would with anyone, you could have fights about non-religious stuff with people in your own religion, right? But for some reason, Hitler did not like Jewish people, even though they were just like everybody else. So her family lived for 6 years in Germany, and there they lived for 6 years until Germany, then they invaded the Netherlands. In 1940, Jews were forced to register themselves for the government. They were segregated and forced out of business. So if you see here on the map, we've got Germany, and over here is the Netherlands. So they're just right by each other. But her family, when Hitler took power and they knew they were not safe, they went to another country and fled. But you know what? Hitler invaded the Netherlands too. He was after the Jews all over Europe. In the summer of 1942, Anne received a diary as a gift for her 13th birthday. She began writing it immediately, describing the restrictions were placed on Jewish people. Later that summer, deporting Jews from the Netherlands began. Deporting means you force people out of their country. That meant people would be pulled from their homes, crammed in a train for days, only to arrive at a concentration camp, often called work camps. Excessive physical labor, gas chambers, starvation, disease, and torture awaited anyone the Nazis viewed as a threat. So it wasn't just Jewish people, it was mostly Jewish people. But if you had dark-colored skin or you believed things they didn't like, you could be sent away to these camps too. So, Mr. Terry, could you show the picture of Anne and her sister? So Anne and her sister Margot. There we go. So Margot's the older sister, Anne is younger, and there's two pictures there of them. When Anne's sister Margot received orders to report for deportation, the family went into hiding instead. They found shelter in a hidden room in the attic of Anne's father's workplace with help of employees he had trusted for years. Could you show the picture of where they went into hiding? Okay, well, that's them fleeing. So they're all fleeing they had to take. They couldn't take much because if you packed all your stuff up, they'd know you were leaving. And so when you fled, you had to just take whatever you could, put many layers of clothes on and just leave, because those are the only clothes you were going to bring with you. And then in there's also a picture of the building. So they created in her father's workplace in the attic, a really tiny place where her family, her two sisters, her mom and dad, and another family could stay safe. And in there you could see it was 450 square feet. Which, now I'm not a builder, but I think it's probably not any bigger than this area behind me. We had two families had to live in that space. And you can see there's a little toilet in there, that tiny little, it's just a hole they sat on. They couldn't even use the toilet during the day because the people downstairs in the business would hear them, and nobody could know they were there or they would be sent away to these camps. So they all had to be super quiet. They couldn't flush the toilet during the day. It was a very, very challenging way to live. So what do you think, Ishmael, if you were stuck in a little place like that all day long for 2 years, How would you like it?
Okay.
As long as you didn't have school to go to? Okay, but remember, they didn't have access to books or TV, so it was probably pretty boring. All right, so anyway, activity in the annex was extremely limited due to the need for silence during business hours. Anne spent most of her time reading and writing in her diary. She documented her feelings and ambitions. She detailed the day-to-day actions of the Nazi regime whenever updates were available to her. She expressed her goals and aspirations to have a career and to be remembered. This is one of the things she wrote. On April 5th, 1944, she wrote, "I finally realized that I must do my schoolwork to keep from being ignorant, to get on in life, to become a journalist, because that's what I want. I know I can write, but it remains to be seen whether I really have talent. And if I don't have the talent to write books or newspaper articles, I can always write for myself. But I want to achieve more than that. I want to be useful or bring enjoyment to all people, even those I've never met. I want to go on living even after my death. And that's why I'm so grateful to God for having given me this gift, which I can use to develop myself and to express all that's inside me." So she was only 13, but she had goals. Lois, what might be your goal that you want to do when you grow up?
Oh, like a job. Like working at the Humane Society.
Okay, work with the animals in the Humane Society? Okay, Oliver, how about you?
Nothing.
Nothing yet? Isabel, do you have a dream? What you might want to do?
I haven't really decided.
There's so many options. Yeah, I agree. But she was starting to think about it, and she thought she would want to be a journalist. But in the morning of August 4th, 1944, German officers stormed the annex, the attic of the building, finding Anne and the others. They had spent 761 days in hiding. So I think that's more than 2 years. They were sent to a Dutch work camp. That's another nearby place on the map. Holland is very near to where we were looking. Let's see where we're here. So just really nearby, they were sent to, but a work camp is more than a work camp. It was not good. Before being eventually exported to Auschwitz, as they arrived, prisoners were separated by men, women, and children. Those who were ruled unfit for labor, including any children under the age of 15, were immediately killed. So Anne was lucky. She had just turned 15. She had celebrated her 15th birthday only 2 months prior, which saved her from the gas chamber. The gas chamber is where they put people to death. One of the last recounts of Anne's life is told by a childhood friend who had attended her 13th party when she received her diary. She recalls seeing Anne in the camp in late January, lying on the ground, looking indescribably weak. Carrie, could you show the picture of the people in the camps when they were, there's a picture in there when they were rescued and they were all laying on the ground. Okay, maybe I didn't mark that one. Lost my place. Even then, Anne spoke of her desire to write a book based on her diary after the war had ended. Although details of her death are undocumented, there is evidence to suggest that Anne and Margot were among the 17,000 prisoners to die during a typhus epidemic in February 1943. So do you see the children in the camps? They're behind barbed wire. They shaved the women's heads when they arrived at the camps, and the children, they didn't get fed much. They were very weak, and there were a lot of diseases. And unfortunately, she died just before she could have been freed by the Allies. 2 months later, the concentration camps were liberated. She was mere months away from safety. Anne's father was the only member of her family to survive. He returned to Amsterdam, where he heard of the deaths of his wife and 2 daughters. He also received Anne's diary, saved for him by his secretary, who had helped them in hiding. Her father admitted he was unaware of her detailed diary, but as he read the pages, he was moved by her repeated wish to be an author. He wanted to make her dream of living on long after death a reality, to publish her book. So what do you think he did with her diary?
He published it.
Yeah. Would you have done that if you were her dad?
Nope.
Nope.
I would just put it in the
Yeah, so that's a tough call he had to make because there were some personal thoughts in there. But he had to think it through, and he decided, you know what? I think she would have wanted it published. The Diary of Anne Frank has become one of the most read, most influential, and most important books in the world. Her story not only helped document an event that many were trying to downplay or deny, but she gave a face to the 11 million victims who were killed. Her diary gave strangers the opportunity to feel her pain and fear. She provoked empathy and captured a worldwide audience, which had been her dream. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt said the publication was one of the wisest and most moving commentaries on war and its impact on human beings that she had ever read. John F. Kennedy said, of all the multitudes who throughout history have spoken for human dignity in times of great suffering and loss, no voice is more compelling than that of Anne Frank. So that's the story of Anne, a child who actually made a really big difference. She suffered a lot, but out of her suffering came some important messages for all of us. So thank you for the story. We are going to sing you to clap now.
In 1984, I had a conversation with a friend who just returned from Europe. She said she had visited the Dachau concentration camp. I asked why she did that. She said, I felt I had to. So when I was in Germany soon after, I went to Dachau. All I will say is that it's grim. So as I make my inadequate comments about the Holocaust, you will see that I care. I don't understand why someone is criticized, ostracized, murdered just because they're different from me. I like the line from a song from the musical Hair, just because I look different, you think I'm subversive. Several years ago, I noticed a book rack outside of Bookleggers. I love that name for a used bookstore. It was in Chicago. There I noticed Suite Française by Irene Nemirovsky. It's one of my favorite books. Irene Nemirovsky was a Russian Jew who spent most of her short life in France. Soon after 1942, she was arrested by the French police and sent to Auschwitz, where she died. One of her daughters kept the manuscript, which wasn't published until 2004. I will add a ribbon today in her honor. The New York Times called this stunning, a tour de force. Superb, the Washington Post. Nemirovsky sees the fullness of humanity, a lost masterpiece, in the Oprah magazine. During the Holocaust, a German minister said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. Someone else said, the only thing that is necessary for the triumph of evil in the world is for good men and women to do nothing. So on the day after an anniversary for the end of the Holocaust, and because of the threats to democracy in today's world, we must do our very best to never forget and work to see that it never happens again.